India has surpassed Japan to become the fourth largest economy in the world. This is what recently Niti Aayog's CEO BVR Subramaniam said in a statement.
We are the fourth largest economy as I speak. We are a $4 trillion economy as I speak. And this is not my data, this is IMF data.
Now, adding to this, he also remarked that India is set to replace Germany in the next 2.5 to 3 years to become the third largest economy in the whole world, only after United States of America and China. Now, currently, as of May 2025, it is debatable that India has surpassed Japan or not, because some experts are saying that India has currently not surpassed Japan, but by the end of 2025, India will definitely surpass Japan to become the fourth largest economy in the world. And currently, many experts are saying that India's GDP currently, it's around $3.9 trillion. And as soon as it becomes $4.1 trillion, it will surpass Japan. But this is not the concern over here. Now, while on one hand, we say India is going to become the fourth largest economy or is going to become the third largest economy, while on purchasing power parity terms, we are already the third largest economy since the last 1 decade. But the question is that is this growth sufficient? Or the question is that is this growth making Indian people better off or not? Let me give you a contradictory opinion. If we talk about per capita income, that is the GDP of the country divided by the population, that is per person GDP, per capita income, India's per capita income is around $2,800. Between $2,800 to $2,900 is India's per capita income, which is abysmally low, and it is so low that India is not even in the top 130 nations in the entire world. So out of 189 countries, India is not even in 130 top nations if we talk about per capita income. So while on one hand, we are the fourth largest economy, on the other hand, we are not in the first 130 nations with respect to the per capita income. It shows a very contrasting picture, a very ironical picture of Indian economy. So what this contradiction is all about? What is actual numbers of GDP with respect to India? What has been the growth story with respect to India in the last 1 decade? And what can India do in future in order to become a progressive economy and to enhance its per capita income? All these questions we'll be trying to answer in this particular session. Hello, my name is Peetpal Singh and you're watching Perspective. Okay, so very briefly, let me take you through India's economic journey. In 1991, a very prominent year where India faced a balance of payment crisis and foreign exchange reserves were only left to an extent for 2 weeks. After that, recovering from it and performing LPG reforms, liberalization, privatization, globalization, in the year 1991, India's GDP was around $260 billion. By the year 2007, we achieved the $1 trillion economy mark. So it took us around 60 years after independence to achieve that $1 trillion economy mark. But from 2007 to 2014, it took us just 7 years to double the economy. That means from $1 trillion economy, we became $2 trillion economy by the year 2014. And from 2014 to 2021, again 7 more years to again increase 1 more trillion in our GDP, which means from 2014 to 2021, we became $3 trillion economy. So by 2021, we were a $3 trillion economy. And by the year 2025, we are talking that India will become a $4 trillion economy. So it just took 4 years for us to reach from $3 trillion to $4 trillion. Now, this is a very magnificent growth shown by India. But can there be more growth, and is there more potential for India to grow? Definitely the answer is yes. And we don't have to go very far to see this. We have to just see China, which has doubled, tripled, and even 5 times increased its GDP in the last many years. Now, while we say India will become the 4th largest economy, let me tell you what is the extent or what is the size of the top 5 economies of the entire world. If we look at United States of America, the largest economy in the whole world, its GDP is around $30 trillion. If we look at the second largest economy, that is China, its GDP is around $19 trillion, again humongous. If we look at the third largest economy, Germany, its GDP is around $4.7 trillion. And look at the fourth largest economy, it's Japan. Its GDP is around $4.1 trillion. And if you look at India's economy, its GDP is around $3.9 trillion. And by the end of this year, we are going to surpass Japan and increase our GDP from 3.9 to around $4.1 trillion, of course. And after that, the sixth largest economy, it is United Kingdom, whose GDP is around $3.8 trillion. So this is the top 6 economies in the entire world. And we see the gap between India and China. And let me tell you, the gap between India and China was just $100 billion in 1980s. $100 billion, that's all. But you see right now, India's GDP is around 4 trillion and China's GDP is around 19 trillion. Which means Chinese economy is around 5 times bigger than India, which means 5 Indian economies combined makes one Chinese economy. And if we compare ourselves with the United States of America, which is around $30 trillion, it is very massive, it is very humongous, which means around 7 to 8 Indian economies combined will make one US economy, which is a very humongous size for any economy to exist in the world. Now, while we have seen the GDP numbers, alongside this, we also need to see the per capita income. See, the per capita income of also most of these nations is very huge. Most of these nations have a per capita income of more than $50,000. There are some economies like Luxembourg, Monaco, Switzerland, and different other Ireland and different other nations whose per capita income is more than $1 lakh. And India's per capita income is around $2,800. US per capita income, it's around again $90,000. India's per capita income is around $2,800, not even in the top 130 economies of the world. So there are different countries like Angola, Egypt, Uzbekistan, Palestine, Sri Lanka, Philippines, Bhutan, Venezuela, whose per capita income is better than India. So Vietnam, Jordan, Lebanon, Indonesia, Iran, all these nations are ahead of India with respect to the per capita income. And there are 130 such nations, 130 nations lists who are better than India with respect to the per capita income. And not just this, very recently in the year 2024, the World Inequality Lab, they released a report highlighting that the top 1% richest people in the country control and own more than 40% of the national wealth of the country, which showed a stark economic inequality in the nation. So on one hand, we say that India's GDP is increasing a lot. It is going to become the 4th largest economy. On the other hand, we see 2 contradictions. One contradiction that the per capita income is critically low. And second contradiction is that the inequality, economic inequality in India is really very, very high. And alongside this, if you have to see the third contradiction as well, unemployment rates in India are also abysmally high. And also alongside this, informal economy in our country, it makes around 90% of the entire economy, which means 90% of the workforce in our country is working in informal sector, which also makes us question that is the GDP really a good indicator of economic growth or not? So we don't have to be too pessimistic in this regard as well. Definitely, it is a good news that India is going to become the 4th largest economy. But the problem which we are trying to state here is that the other different indicators of economic performance also needs to be looked at and needs to be improved for India to get an inclusive growth, for India to get a holistic development and holistic growth. Which is why this GDP numbers are good, but per capita income, unemployment rate, inequality level in our country also needs to be improved. Now, when we talk about GDP, gross domestic product, calculation of GDP, most of you would know, can be done through 3 methods. First method is your value addition method. We also call it as production method. Second method is income method. And third, the most prominent and widely used method is your expenditure method. Now, if we talk about expenditure method per se, expenditure method can be classified into 4 different components. If we add all those components, we get to know the GDP of a country. And as you would know, in the year 2015, we actually changed the way we are calculating the GDP. Earlier, we used to calculate GDP in our country at factor cost. Now we are calculating the GDP in our country at market price. So what is the difference? The simple difference is that in the GDP calculation today, we are adding net indirect taxes. Earlier, we were not adding net indirect taxes. We were only taking into account factor cost of the products. but now we are taking the market price of the products, which is why we are calculating net indirect tax when we are calculating GDP. Now going back again to the expenditure method. Expenditure method divides GDP into four components as suggested earlier. First component is the component of consumption. Second component is the component of investment. Third component is of government expenditure. And fourth is net exports. Now, how do we come up with this method? See, all of you know that there are four sectors of the economy on the basis of entities involved. Those four sectors are household sector, producer sector, then government sector, and then external sector. Expenditure made by each of these sectors, when it is combined, it becomes the GDP of the country. So expenditure made by the household sector is what? Consumption, C. Expenditure made by the producer sector is what? Investment, which is I. And expenditure made by the government is simply known as government expenditure, G. And expenditure in the external sector is net exports. That means X minus M, exports minus imports. So your C plus I plus G plus X minus M, that is consumption plus investment plus government expenditure plus net exports, becomes your GDP. Now, why I am telling you this method of GDP? The answer is very simple. In order to enhance the GDP of a country, all these components should equally be contributing. What if the government expenditure is fueling the GDP? Is it helping public in any way? To an extent, definitely it helps the public. But if the consumption of a country is taking or fueling the GDP of the country, that is very good. If investments in the country, if net exports of the country are boosting the GDP, that makes GDP very robust. But again, the question still remains, how do we ensure that the GDP which is generated in the economy is also distributed in the economy equally as well? See, there are two questions in front of us in this case. Whether the GDP pie we should redistribute, or whether the GDP pie we need to enhance. Always the focus should be in enhancing the pie, which means that rich should be made rich, billionaires should become trillionaires, but the millionaires should also become billionaires. Which means we need to promote wealth creators, we need to promote wealth creation. The startup in India needs to improve, startup culture in India needs to improve. We have Startup India, we have Make in India, we have Stand Up India, different other programs. But we need to ensure that rich people definitely are becoming richer, poor people are also becoming richer. It shouldn't be that you take from the rich and give to the poor. Rather, it should be that you promote the rich and you also promote the poor, so that overall we can increase the size of the global economic pie and the Indian economic pie as well. Only then the problem of inequality will be solved. Which is why I told you there are two schools. One is to redistribute the pie, one is to increase the size of the pie. Our government, our country currently is focusing on increasing the size of the pie, which is why there is good news as well, that in the last 10 years, we have actually pulled out millions of people out of multi-dimensional poverty in our country, which is also very good improvement. And multi-dimensional poverty rate in India is around 5%. So multi-dimensional poverty rate in India is also very low. This is also one significant improvement. On the other hand, we need to reduce the level of economic inequality, which means wealth inequality and income inequality as well. And that can be done by improving the living standards of the poor. Firstly, we need to ensure that absolute poverty should be absolutely eradicated, which means there should be no individual in the country who should not be having food, clothing and shelter or basic necessities. That needs to be given to everyone. And definitely we have a lot of schemes. We have Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, we have Awas Yojana, we have Poshan Abhiyan, we have different other initiatives which are ensuring that food, clothing and shelter and education and healthcare services are being provided to every individual in the country who is not even able to afford it. That is one, reduction or removal of absolute poverty. Now, second is we need to provide skills to the individuals. Now, definitely we have Skill India program. We have different other vocational programs, vocational training centers in the country as well. But what needs to be improved is the tier 2, tier 3 education sector. If that is not improving, just by focusing on the IITs, IIMs won't do the change. We need to improve the local government colleges. We need to equip the faculties. We need to equip the facilities of those institutions in order to ensure that skill is imparted to them rather than rote learning of the books. If that is ensured, again, skill will be imparted to the students of today, and those students of today tomorrow will go for skill-based jobs. If they go for skill-based jobs, they will uplift their living standards and they would come out of that multidimensional poverty. And eventually we will see that GDP will rise, but GDP's contribution will also be equal. It won't be unequal as we see today. So that is one thing which could be done. Another thing which definitely the government is doing, and government has pledged around 11.11 lakh crores for the infrastructure sector in the country. That definitely needs to be done and continuously needs to be done, because capital formation in the country is very, very important. And as you would know, capital formation is having a multiplier effect in the economy, which means 1 rupee spent for formation of capital, formation of road, railways, bridges, ports or airports in the country, 1 rupee spent on that gives the benefit or return to the economy to the tune of 4 to 5 rupees, which means a multiplier effect. And while it provides a multiplier effect, it is also trickle down impact, where if you give money to the top, it trickle downs to the bottom. And one more thing is there, while it trickle downs to the bottom, we need to ensure that while it is trickling down, there shouldn't be corruption. There shouldn't be any leakage. And to ensure that, we need to have transparency. In order to have transparency, we need to have e-governance. So it is not just one. A synergy-based effort of all the sectors are required simultaneously in order for Indian economy to grow and to grow equitably. And not just grow to an extent that just show the GDP numbers, but to grow to an extent where each individual is also getting the benefit of those GDP numbers. And which is why the lives of each and every common citizen in the country can be impacted. So again, bolstering the economic performance through capital formation, infrastructure development, and while infrastructure development is being done, reducing the levels of corruption, zero tolerance to corruption, improving the transparency, e-governance, digitization of processes, and also streamlining discretionary power. That is very essential in order to ensure that overall economic development happens in the country. There is a very big difference between economic growth and economic development. Economic growth is very good, it is in numbers. Economic development is both quantitative and qualitative. So both quantitative and qualitative growth we need to have, which means economic development needs to be ensured. And while this is being done, we will be able to solve the problem of lower per capita income. We will be able to solve the problem of lower employment in the country. We will be able to solve the problem, different other economic problems which exist in the country, and we'll be able to move towards a prosperous India, a Viksit Bharat by the year 2047. Now, while all those things are being done, we should not neglect our external sector also. And the recent news, as you would know, that India has signed a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom. Like this, we need to sign a free trade agreement with a lot of different countries, especially with the European Union, which will help our country a lot. Additional to that, we need to be a part of a lot of economic unions, a lot of custom unions in the world in order to get the trade benefit and leverage our manufacturing sector to boost our exports. So while all these sectors are taken care of, household, producer, government and external, we will definitely be able to ensure that equitable distribution of GDP is done in our country while the GDP grows. So the size of the pie continues to increase and more people contribute to increasing the size of the pie. Which means rather than taking from the rich and giving to the poor, we are increasing the size of the rich, we are increasing the size of poor becoming rich as well. This is what we need to ensure as a nation in order to become a developed country by the year 2047. I hope you gained a new perspective from this session. An Indian economy becoming the fourth largest economy is definitely a great news, but we need to do a lot of things in order to become a good enough economy so that entire section of the population gets benefited and feel proud of our economy. All the very best and have a great day. Thank you.